This past weekend, a Scrabble game made me make this sound.
And there it is! Oh!
Oh! And say these words. Somebody in YouTube said, "There's your video, Will," and I'm pretty sure
There we go.
that's
And yeah,
true. At the MGI International Scrabble Classics from Milton Keynes, UK, former world champion Brett Smitheram and reigning North American champion Josh Sokol were set to face off in a pivotal battle late in the event. This game was absolutely packed with amazing plays and sharp tactical decisions, so let's get right into it. Josh goes first, holding low point tiles that don't contain a 7-letter word. Although playing a short word or exchanging tiles are options here, the leftover tiles aren't quite strong enough to justify it, so he plays Ladino instead for 16. Brett has the first blank, and the best spot to use it is with double doubles through the N. Tainture is available for 78, but that move gives Josh some good scoring spots in response. He finds and plays a much more defensive option of Ritenuto for the same score, offering no easy scoring spots back. Next, Josh has one standout play, the Collins-only bingo of clouding through the I. As a more recent convert to the international lexicon, Josh hasn't yet seen this word, and plays glucan instead to burn through all of his clunkier tiles at once. Brett draws too many vowels and dumps many of them at once with a lay, also retaining a consonant and blocking some areas of the board. Josh draws poorly after glucan with 2 sets of duplicated consonants, and he plays the somewhat self-descriptive turd. It says a lot that this is actually his best move here. On the other hand, Brett draws the second blank, and with the 7-letter vibices available at the base of the board, he finds something even better. Vibrances through AN as a 9-letter bingo, creating a much more difficult board for playing 8-letter bingos. Down 120 points after 3 turns, Josh gets aggressive and plays Dork to set up his S in a threatening way. Brett doesn't have an S of his own, nor does he have a play underlapping a lay that might address the Dork's hook. So he plays Peeg for 19. Note that he could play his second E here for 4 more points. Leaving the E off will allow him to block the Dork's hook more conclusively next turn. Josh now has 3 A's, and he can dump 2 of them for a decent 16 points. Instead, he anticipates Brett's block and sets up a second volatile lane by playing Ah for just 7 points instead. Brett's plan comes together, and rather than playing something like Emit for 30, leaving the solid EIR leave, he plays Merit instead to reach up 1 more square and conclusively block the Dork's hook, a very clever 2-turn sequence by the former world champ. Still, thanks to Josh's previous opening, he has 1 more place to bingo, and he draws one in N-all-A's for 77. With multiple positions of N-all-A's and its anagram of low knees available, he picks the one that will create a more flexible bingo lane to continue his comeback. Brett draws the Z, and he has Azo for 40 points. This move does nothing to address the new line Josh created, and even creates a new threat to deal with in the form of Azon hooking plays. So Brett takes a 4-point sacrifice to play Zoa instead, a much better defensive move that once again puts Josh down over 100 points. Next, Josh can play Aphid for 31, opening another dangerous lane. But dealing with that lane won't be hard, as a simple play through the D by Brett will block and possibly score well to boot. Instead, he finds a brilliant option here, Goo for just 11 points. It's a lot of points to sacrifice, so what is Josh thinking here? Well, he's noticed that 8 of the 9 A's have already been played. Goo sets up Josh's final A for the Ague hook, and there's no chance Brett can have an A of his own to block it. Brett realizes what's happening here quickly, and without any way to fully block the spot, he elects to play Jism for 35, cashing his S to partially obstruct the Ague hook and score quite well in the process. It's a solid move, and engine analysis suggests that he's well over 99% to win this game. Back to Josh, who draws the X. With 2 good places to score 40 points with it, he instead makes his second straight brilliant move here, picks for 36. This move doesn't sacrifice that much on the scoreboard, but not only does it keep that last A on his rack to continue to work towards a big ague play, but it also makes it essentially impossible now for Brett to block the hook in one move. Just look at how inaccessible these squares are surrounding the hook. Brett does still have a nearly 100-point lead, and he decides that if he can't block Josh's setup, he can make one of his own with the final S, playing Hurl for 15. There's still a Y lurking for Hurley, but apart from that, Brett has excellent chances of landing a game-ending follow-up bingo in his newly created spot. Josh has 2 goals here: score as well as he can to narrow the gap and hold on to that all-important A. He plays Whir for 38, by far his best move to accomplish both goals. Holding ENS after his last move, Brett draws the atrocious IOOO and is essentially forced to play OO for 24, shedding 2 of those vowels. Keeping his N will allow him to follow up with heavy plays hooking Ion some of the time as well. Next, Josh draws the clunky VY combination. Ovary for 50 points is sorely tempting here, setting up a new bingo lane in the process. But Josh's aspirations for that spot are even bigger than this, and Brett's previous play signals a strong bingo leave, making it risky to open such an easy lane for him. In fact, Brett would have Enoscene ready to play in that new spot. So when Josh plays Bye instead, he keeps his threat alive and gives Brett a much more difficult board to work with. With all 1-point tiles and no playable bingos, Brett is going to struggle to score well here. So he decides to work towards blocking Josh's setup, playing Nib for 7. His goal is to follow up with a play next turn that gets him closer to the ague setup, blocking some possible bingos in the process. He may also draw a bingo hooking Snib as well. But once again, Josh makes a clever play to foil that blocking plan. He could play Kadi here for 33, but that would use up that precious final A. So he plays Chin instead, making it impossible for Brett to play anything else on that same column further up the board. Note that playing the N is also critical for Josh here. He has no 7-letter bingos he can draw by playing just the Q and holding on to the N. With his lead dwindling and still holding only low point tiles, Brett plays Roin, setting up his S in a new spot on the board. This move leaves 2 tiles in the bag, and Josh still hasn't drawn a bingo. However, Brett's last move gives him a lot of information. Looking at the unplayed tiles, there's a pattern, a whole bunch of E's and 2 F's. And Brett didn't play an E or an F on his previous move. If he had had multiple E's, he almost certainly would have played at least one, and he surely would have played an F for extra points if he had had it. Therefore, the odds are much better than usual that the 2 tiles remaining in the bag are either E's or F's. On the live stream, when we see Brett draw both F's, we know that Josh needs to recognize this possibility and make a play that gives him a 7-letter bingo with a draw of EE. And amazingly, he does exactly that. He plays Ted, guaranteeing him an unblockable out bingo of Overawe if he draws EE. And when he does, there's absolutely nothing Brett can do to block the spot. To Brett's credit, he quickly realizes his fate and makes his top endgame move of Feist, going up by 85 points. And just as quickly, Josh lays down Overawe for 97 points, securing his first lead of the game with his final move and collecting extra points from Brett en route to a 409 to 387 win. This game was an absolute masterclass by both players. Brett's find of the 9-letter Vibrances, his 2-turn blocking sequence of Peeg into Merit, and fluid transition from defense to offense were up to his standards as a world-class player. On the other hand, Josh's calculated aggression facing a huge deficit was a sight to behold, and his extremely sharp play of Gu combined with multiple plays protecting his setup from Brett's possible blocks were incredible to watch. I hope you enjoyed this detailed breakdown of my favorite game from the MGI International Scrabble Classics, but there were so many other amazing games on the live stream. So if you're interested to watch more, I'll put the full links in the video description below. Also, if you watched the coverage, let me know what you thought about it with a comment on this video. Constructive criticism welcome, what you liked, didn't like, etc. Finally, don't forget to follow Josh on his own channel as he chronicles his journey from the North American lexicon to competing on the world stage. With his eventual 4th place finish in such a prestigious event, he's well ahead of schedule to becoming one of the best players in the world.